Let your sister open the good ones. You're used to less. My mom said as my sister opened expensive gifts all through Christmas morning. When my turn came, Mom handed me a leftover stocking and started cleaning plates. I stayed long enough to watch my kids notice. Then I took them home. Months later, Mom finally came by unannounced and froze on my porch. My name is Joel. I'm 33. I have 2 kids, Ellie who's 7 and Theo who's 5, and a wife named Marin who is the reason I'm sitting here typing this instead of driving to my mother's house at midnight to have the conversation I've been rehearsing in the shower for 11 months. Marin keeps telling me I don't owe anyone that conversation. I think she's right. I also think she's been right about a lot of things I wasn't ready to hear, and the list of those things is long enough that I should probably stop being surprised by it. This is about Christmas, but it's not really about Christmas. It's about what Christmas was made of and who was making it, and what happened when that person stopped. I need to tell you about my mom first. Her name is Diane. She's 61. She lives alone in the house I grew up in, a 3-bedroom ranch with vinyl siding that I've been repainting every 4 years since I was 20 because nobody else volunteers, and if I don't do it the paint peels, and she calls me about the peeling, and it's easier to just repaint it. She has 2 kids, me and my sister Vicky. Vicky is 35. Vicky is the one who gets the cashmere. Before I tell you what happened, I need to tell you something about Diane that makes the rest of this harder to carry. When I was 9 and broke my collarbone falling off a bike ramp that Cal Pfeiffer dared me to try, my mom carried me to the car. I was big for 9, almost 80 pounds, and she picked me up from the gravel and carried me across the yard and into the passenger seat like I was made of paper. She didn't yell at me for being stupid. She didn't ask whose ramp it was or why I thought I could clear a plywood jump on a bike with training wheels. She drove with one hand on the wheel and held my hand with the other the entire way to St. Joseph's. And at the hospital, she told the nurse I was the bravest kid she'd ever met. She sat on the edge of my bed that night and read me 3 chapters of a book I don't remember the name of, and she did the voices. She did every voice differently. The pirate was gruff, and the princess was squeaky, and the dragon sounded like our neighbor Mr. Callahan, who talked through his nose. I remember that. I remember her doing the voices, and I remember the weight of her hand on my cast, and I remember thinking this is what it feels like when somebody picks you first. I was 9. I thought she was always going to pick me. That's the version of my mom I need you to hold in your head while I tell you about the stocking. Because the woman who carried me across a yard is the same woman who handed me a used gift card on Christmas morning without looking at me. I keep trying to make those 2 people the same person. Some nights I can. Most nights I can't. Our family Christmas has worked the same way for 7 years. I drive 2 hours with Ellie and Theo in car seats and Marin in the passenger seat, holding a cooler of sides and a pie that takes her 2 days to make. I arrive the day before Christmas Eve. I buy the tree from a lot on Route 6 because my mom doesn't drive that far. I set up the tree in the living room, in the same corner, next to the same window. I hang the lights because Mom says she can't reach the top branches and Vicky isn't there yet, and won't be until Christmas morning. I wrap the gifts, all of them, including the ones Mom gives to Vicky, because Mom buys them but can't wrap, or says she can't, and hands me the shopping bags and says, "You're better at this," and goes to watch television. I cook Christmas dinner. The turkey, the stuffing from scratch, not a box, the mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole with the fried onion topping, the gravy that takes 40 minutes of stirring, and I do it standing at the stove while everyone else is in the living room. I've been cooking the entire holiday meal since I was 19 because Mom told me her hands cramp and Vicky doesn't cook, and nobody questioned it, and I didn't either. The entire extended family has complimented Mom's Christmas dinner every year for 7 years. Diane, you outdid yourself. Nobody cooks like you, Diane. Mom says thank you. She accepts the compliment the way you accept something that's yours. I have never corrected anyone. Not once. I just go back to the kitchen and start the dishes. Vicky drives 45 minutes. She arrives Christmas morning, after the cooking is done and the table is set, and the house smells like the meal I made. She opens presents. She eats. She helps herself to seconds. She says, "This is amazing, Mom," about the turkey I brined for 24 hours. She hugs Mom. She leaves by 3 p.m. with leftovers in Tupperware I brought from my own kitchen. That is Vicky's Christmas. Arrive, receive, eat, leave. I did the math last January. I keep receipts in a shoebox in my closet because Marin says I'm a hoarder, and I say I'm organized, and the truth is somewhere between the two of us being right. 7 years of receipts. Trees, $85 to $120 per year. Turkeys and groceries, $280 to $350 per year, depending on head count. Gifts for Mom, Vicky, Vicky's friends the years they came. Extended family that sometimes showed up, decorations when the old ones broke. The good china plates Mom wanted one year, the linen tablecloth she saw in a Williams-Sonoma catalog. I added it up on a Saturday morning while Marin was at the farmer's market with the kids. $22,400 over 7 years. I wrote the number on the back of a receipt and looked at it for a long time. $22,400 building a Christmas that my mother got complimented on. My mother's Christmas that looked like her effort and her warmth and her love. It was mine. All of it was mine. She just stood in front of it. My stocking, every year, was whatever was left over. Drugstore candy. The kind that comes in bags of assorted stuff where half the pieces are flavors nobody wants. A pair of socks from a pack of 6 that I'm fairly sure were originally bought for someone else. And a gift card. This year the gift card was for a coffee chain. Marin noticed before I did that it had been used. $11.47 remaining out of $25. Mom didn't even buy a fresh card. She took one from her purse, the one she'd been using at drive-thrus for weeks, and dropped it in a stocking and handed it to me while she was already turning toward the kitchen to ask me where I'd put the turkey pan. 3 Christmases of used gift cards. Marin checked the others. At least 3 of the previous year's cards had partial balances. My mother's Christmas gift to her son was her pocket change. But the gifts. I need to talk about the gifts because the gifts are where my daughter learned to count. This Christmas, Vicky received a cashmere sweater. I saw the tag when she held it up, $180. A KitchenAid stand mixer, $350. A pair of pearl earrings in a velvet box. A spa day gift card, $200. Knee-high leather boots that Vicky squealed about. That's 5 gifts I could see. There were others in a bag she carried to her car later that I didn't inventory. My daughter Ellie was sitting cross-legged on the carpet next to the tree, watching her aunt open box after box, tissue paper piling up around her, ribbon curling on the floor. Ellie wasn't jealous. She was doing something worse. She was keeping track. 3 years ago, Marin told me something she'd been carrying since the Christmas before. She said it carefully, the way you hand someone a glass that's already cracked. She saw Mom do something while I was in the kitchen. Mom took a gift I had bought for Vicky, a wool scarf I'd picked out at a shop in our town and paid $65 for, and wrapped myself with the good paper. And she removed my tag, wrote "From Mom" on a new one in her handwriting, and placed it back under the tree. Marin watched from the hallway. She didn't say anything because years ago, early in our marriage, I'd asked her to please not make waves with my family. She respected that. She held it for 3 years. When she finally told me in January, she was sitting across from me at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and she said, "Joel, the scarf wasn't the only one. I've seen her do it at least twice before. She takes what you buy, puts her name on it, and Vicky thanks her." I sat there, and the tea in my own mug went cold, and I didn't drink it. What I felt wasn't anger. It was something flatter, like looking down and seeing that the floor you've been standing on isn't solid. Like you could fall through, but you haven't yet, and you don't know when. The childhood stuff. I'll go through this fast. My birthdays were never just mine. Every birthday I can remember was combined with something else. A family barbecue because everyone's free that weekend anyway. A road trip to the lake that happened to overlap with my birthday, but was really about Vicky's end-of-year dance recital celebration. An aunt's retirement dinner. I have not had a birthday that was only about me since I turned 8. And even that one I remember Vicky crying about something at the table and Mom getting up to handle it and not coming back for 20 minutes. Vicky got a party every year. A theme. Real invitations, the mailed kind. A cake from a bakery with her name on it in cursive. Mine was sheet cake from the grocery store with "Happy Birthday" in generic blue icing. No name. Nobody specified one when they ordered. Mom paid for Vicky's college. Every dollar. State school, for years. Tuition plus a dorm room plus spending money wired monthly. $68,000. I know because Vicky mentioned it at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, casually, the way you mentioned the weather. Mom covered everything. I was so lucky. She said it while I was sitting across the table, still carrying $41,000 in student loans that I'd been paying down for a decade and finally cleared 2 years ago. Mom's explanation for not helping me was a sentence I can recite from memory. You're the resourceful one, honey. You'll figure it out. The resourceful one. That's what you call the child you don't invest in when you want it to sound like a compliment instead of a decision. When Vicky moved out at 22, Mom preserved her room like a museum. Posters on the walls, dance trophies on the shelf, bedspread unwashed, clothes in the closet that Vicky hasn't worn since college but that hang there on hangers like she might walk in tomorrow and need them. When I moved out at 18, my room was a sewing room within a month. My bed was gone. My posters were in a trash bag in the garage. I found out when I came back for Thanksgiving and opened my door, and there was a sewing machine where my desk used to be. When I bring my kids to visit, they sleep on an air mattress on the floor of the sewing room. 10 feet down the hall, Vicky's preserved bedroom sits empty and clean and perfectly intact, waiting for a person who visits twice a year and stays for 4 hours each time. I also send my mom $300 a month, half for 6 years, for groceries and the gas bill and little things. I set up the auto transfer when she asked, and I forgot about it in the way you forget about things that become the background hum of being someone's reliable son. $21,600 over 6 years. I asked Vicky once, casually at a family dinner, if she sends anything monthly. She looked at me like I'd asked her to explain how an engine works. No, Mom's never asked me. Because Mom doesn't ask the one with the cashmere sweater. Mom asks the resourceful one. 3 years ago, Mom called in a panic. Tax lien on the house. $12,000, or they start proceedings. I took out a personal loan. Didn't tell Marin for 2 weeks because I was ashamed, not of helping, but of how fast I said yes, how I didn't even pause. 2 months later, Mom sent a text to the family group chat that was meant only for Vicky. It said, "Sent you $5,000 for the apartment reno. Enjoy it, sweetie. You deserve nice things." 2 months after I borrowed $12,000 to save her house, she pulled $5,000 out of her savings and gave it to my sister for a kitchen upgrade. The tax lien was real. The redistribution was also real. Christmas morning. The moment. Vicky is opening gifts. Box after box after box. Ellie is on the carpet. Theo is next to me chewing a candy cane sideways, getting it on his shirt. Mom is leaning forward in her chair, smiling the way she smiles when Vicky is delighted, full face, full teeth. The kind of smile I've seen in exactly one direction my entire life. The cashmere, the mixer, the earrings, the boots. Each one held up, examined, appreciated. Then it's my turn. Mom stands up, walks to the tree, picks up a stocking, walks toward me, and she's already turning back toward the kitchen before she's handed it over, already thinking about whatever's next, and she says, "Let your sister open the good ones. You're used to less." She said it like a weather report. Like it was a fact about me as neutral and permanent as my height. You're used to less. She wasn't being cruel. I keep getting stuck on that. She wasn't trying to wound me. She just believed it so completely that she could say it out loud in front of my wife and my children on Christmas morning while walking away from me. It was a fact to her. Joel is used to less. The sky is blue. The turkey takes 4 hours. Joel doesn't need much. I open the stocking. Candy. Socks. The half-used gift card with $11.47 on it. I put everything back in the stocking and set it on the arm of the couch and looked at my daughter. Ellie wasn't looking at the stocking. She was looking at me. And her face was doing something I recognized because I'd felt it on my own face in this same house 100 times across 30 years. She was trying to make it make sense. She was running the numbers in her head. Aunt's pile versus Daddy's stocking, and the equation didn't balance. And she was too young to understand that some equations aren't broken. They're built that way on purpose by people who benefit from the imbalance. On the way out, I was getting coats from the closet. Ellie stopped in the hallway. She looked at the photo wall. I counted later because I couldn't sleep. 26 framed photos. I'm in 2, both group shots, one where I'm at the edge and partially cropped. The grandchildren are in 0. Vicky is in 14, including 3 solo portraits. Ellie stood there in her coat that I'd just zipped up, and she said, loud enough for the kitchen to hear, "Daddy, how come we're not on Grandma's wall?" I heard a dish clink against the counter. Mom heard her. I know she heard her because the dishwasher was between cycles, and the house was quiet except for Ellie's voice and the faucet dripping. Mom didn't answer, didn't come out of the kitchen, didn't say, "Oh, sweetie, I just haven't printed new ones." Nothing. The faucet dripped. I took Ellie's hand and walked out. In the car, Ellie was quiet for 20 minutes. Then she reached into her school backpack and pulled out a notebook and opened it to a page I'd never seen. 2 columns, drawn with a ruler. One column said, Aunt Vicky, with a number. The other said, Us, with a number. Aunt Vicky, 11. Us, 1 stocking candy. The writing trailed off because she ran out of things to tally. She'd started the counting the visit before this one. She had been keeping score for months. She was 7 years old, and she was already doing what I did at 7, watching and measuring and staying quiet about it, because being quiet was the thing our family rewarded from the kid who wasn't the favorite. Marin looked at the notebook in the rearview mirror. I looked at Marin. She was gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, and her jaw was set in that way it gets when she has decided something and is waiting for me to arrive at the same place. She didn't say a word. The highway noise filled the car for 2 hours. 2 weeks later, after the kids were asleep, Marin sat me down at the kitchen table. She said, I've watched this for 8 years. I didn't say anything because you asked me not to. But our daughter is keeping score now, Joel. She's building a spreadsheet on the people who are supposed to love her. If you take them back to that house, you're choosing your mother's comfort over your daughter's childhood. I won't do that anymore. You decide. She wasn't threatening. She was exhausted. Tired in the way that means someone has been holding something for longer than anyone should have to hold anything, and they're finally putting it down, and they're not picking it back up regardless of what you do next. Part of me wanted to call Mom and smooth it over, the way I've smoothed things over my entire life, sanding down the sharp edges so nobody has to feel the cut. Part of me wanted to tell Marin it's not that simple, that families are complicated, that Mom doesn't mean it the way it sounds. And a smaller part, the part that lives in a room I don't open often, felt relief. Because Marin said the thing I was afraid to say. Taking my kids back to that house wasn't love. It was repetition. And repetition is not loyalty. It's just a pattern that nobody's interrupted yet. 3 weeks after Christmas, Vicky called. She said, Mom's upset. You embarrassed her by leaving early. You know how she is, Joel. Just call her and smooth things over like you always do. I said, what did she get you this year? She listed them. The sweater, the earrings, the mixer, the spa card, the boots. I said, I got a stocking with a used gift card that had $11 on it. What part of this am I overreacting to? Pause. Short one. Then, you're being dramatic, Joel. Click. I started therapy in January. 3rd session, the therapist asked me to describe my role in the family without using the word son. I tried several things. They all came out sounding like job postings. I finally said, I'm the person who shows up and makes things work and doesn't get thanked for it. She was stirring her coffee with one of those flat wooden sticks that don't actually stir anything, just push the liquid around, and she looked at me over the rim and said, That's not a family role, Joel. That's a volunteer position, and you've been filling it for free your whole life. I drove home and parked in the driveway and sat there with the engine running for 20 minutes. Marin opened the front door at some point and stood on the step and looked at me through the windshield. She was deciding whether to come to me or let me come inside on my own. She went back in. She's good at knowing which kind of quiet I need. I stopped the $300 auto transfer in February. Stopped calling on Sundays. Stopped driving down for fix-it weekends. Stopped scheduling Mom's dentist and eye doctor because Vicky lives 45 minutes away and I live 2 hours away, and somehow I was the one making the appointments. I didn't announce anything. I just went quiet. And here is the thing that stays with me. It took 6 weeks for my mother to notice. 6 weeks of silence from the son who showed up every single time. She noticed the money first. Not the calls. Not the visits. The checking account. She called in March and said her balance was off. I said I canceled the transfer. She said, why? Not, are you okay? Not, I miss hearing from you. Why? Like I'd canceled her magazine subscription. I said, because I'm used to less, Mom. Remember? 5 seconds of nothing. Then, Joel, that was a joke. I said, okay. Hung up. That's the last real conversation we've had. Now the other side. Because while I was going quiet, Diane's world was shifting in ways she didn't expect and couldn't fix. Easter dinner at my aunt's house. We went. Mom went separately. Extended family saw us arrive in different cars for the first time in anyone's memory. My cousin asked what happened. Mom said I was being dramatic about Christmas gifts. She said it with a little laugh, the way you dismiss something you want other people to dismiss too. Marin was 6 feet away holding a plate of deviled eggs. She heard it. She set the plate down on the counter very carefully, the way you put something down when you're choosing between throwing it and placing it, and walked over to my cousin. She said, calmly, without raising her voice, he got a leftover stocking with a used gift card, and she told him he was used to less. In front of his 7-year-old daughter. The room didn't go movie silent. It went slow. People stopped moving between the kitchen and the patio. My aunt looked at Diane from across the island, and her face changed into something I'd never seen her aim at her own sister. Mom looked at her plate. Nobody said anything else. But the room knew. And Diane knew the room knew. She left early. Said she had a headache. Then the social media thing. Mom's entire online identity was proud grandmother. She posted about Ellie and Theo constantly. Shared milestones. Reposted old photos with captions like, my whole heart, and Grandma's angels. After the withdrawal, she ran out of new material. Her last photo with the kids was from November, a pumpkin patch trip that I organized and drove to and paid for. By April, the comments started. A church friend wrote, haven't seen the little ones in a while. Mom didn't respond. She started recycling photos from 2 years ago. Someone noticed the dates. Another comment. These are old, Diane. When are we getting new grandbaby updates? Mom deactivated her account for 2 weeks. When she came back, she posted a photo of her garden. No kids. No captions about her heart. Mom had a doctor's appointment in February. She called me to drive her. I didn't answer. Texted. No reply. Called Vicky. Vicky said she was busy with work. Mom took a taxi for the first time in years. $34 each way. She called me afterward, not to check in, not to say she missed me, but to tell me how much the taxi cost. She wanted me to know that my absence had a price. $68. That's what she measured it in. I didn't respond. Now the part that runs parallel. The Christmas I built for my kids. I decided in October that we were hosting our own holiday. Marin's parents, Claire and Don, were coming. Marin's brother and his wife. Our neighbors from 3 doors down who have a daughter Ellie's age. I went to the tree lot on Route 6, the same lot I'd been going to for Diane's tree for 7 years, and bought a real tree and strapped it to my car and drove it home and set it up in the living room and called the kids down. We decorated it together. Ellie hung every ornament she touched in the same 3 branches near the bottom, which made the tree look lopsided and wild and ridiculous. And it was the most beautiful tree I've ever had in any house. Theo put a candy cane on a branch, and it immediately fell off, and he picked it up and ate it, and Marin said, that one's decoration, buddy, and he said, it's food now. And that was that. We cooked together as a family. All of us. Marin brined the turkey for 2 days in a bucket in the garage. Don came over early and looked at it and said, that's either genius or a health violation, and Marin said both. And they laughed in the kitchen, and the house smelled like rosemary and butter and something I didn't have a name for. I made the sides. Ellie made sugar cookies that were 90% food coloring and 10% structural integrity. Theo cracked eggs into a bowl for the cornbread and got shell in every single one, and I fished the pieces out without mentioning it, because that was the kind of morning I wanted this to be. Christmas morning, the kids opened presents. Marin and I had wrapped everything in the same paper, same ribbon. Every person in the house got the same number of gifts. Not the same cost. The same count. The same attention to each pile. Ellie opened her 3rd present, an art set she'd been circling in catalogs for months, and then she stopped. She looked around the room at the other piles. She looked at Theo's. At mine. At Marin's. She said, Daddy, everyone got the same. She said it like she'd discovered something new. Like fairness was a surprise. Like she'd never been in a room where nobody got more and nobody got less. I couldn't talk. My throat closed the way it does when something hits the wrong nerve. Marin put her hand on my back. Claire was on the couch, and I saw her squeeze Don's arm. Nobody asked why I was standing in the middle of Christmas morning unable to form words. They let me have the minute. It passed. Ellie went back to her art set. Life continued. Claire helped me wash dishes that night after everyone else had moved to the living room. She's a quiet woman who dries each plate with more attention than it probably needs and doesn't fill silence with words. She put a plate in the cabinet and said, without looking at me, you know what I noticed today, Joel? Your kids don't flinch when they open presents. They're not checking to see if it's fair. They just open them. She picked up another plate. You gave them that. I turned off the water. Stood there with wet hands dripping on the counter. She went back to drying. Now Diane's Christmas. I know what happened because Vicky called Marin 2 days later. Mom bought a pre-lit tree from Walmart. 4 feet tall, the kind that comes in a box with a picture of a family that doesn't look like anyone's actual family. She tried to cook the turkey. She hadn't cooked a full holiday bird in 12 years. Didn't know the timing. Didn't know you have to remove the bag from the cavity. It came out dry on the outside and pink near the bone, and she threw most of it in the trash. Vicky arrived at noon with Chinese takeout and paper bags. She gave Mom a candle. They ate at the kitchen table, the same table I used to set for 8 with the linen cloth and the good plates. Vicky left at 2:30. Mom sat at a table set for 6 with 2 dirty plates and 4 clean ones and a candle that smelled like vanilla and a tree that blinked when she hadn't asked it to. But Vicky said something. Over that takeout, in the kitchen that smelled like sesame chicken instead of turkey and gravy, Vicky said, "This is depressing, Mom." Mom said, "If your brother hadn't been so dramatic." And Vicky said something she'd apparently been carrying for a long time. She said, "He cooked every Christmas dinner for 7 years, Mom. He bought the tree. He wrapped your gifts. The ones you gave me, half of them he paid for. Did you know that?" Mom said she didn't. Vicky said, "I did. I watched him do it every single year, and I never said anything because it was easier to let you put your name on his work than to ask why you treated him like the staff." It wasn't a confrontation. Not the kind I would have imagined. It was 2 women eating from cardboard containers at a table built for a family that wasn't there anymore, saying things that were too late and too tired and not enough. But Vicky said it. I don't know what to do with the fact that my sister, who opened every re-tagged gift and ate every turkey she complimented Mom for and left by 3 p.m. every year with my Tupperware, was the one who finally named it out loud. She named it in a kitchen I built, to a woman who thought she built it herself. The worst part of Diane's Christmas wasn't the food or the tree or the empty chairs. It was the silence. For 7 years that house was full of my kids tearing paper and running between rooms and Theo knocking over a drink and Ellie squealing about something and me yelling from the kitchen that the gravy was ready. This year, nothing. No running feet. No paper tearing. No small voices. The grandchildren made the holiday alive. Everything else, the turkey, the tree, the decorations, that was just infrastructure. The kids were the whole point. And Mom traded access to them for the right to hand their father a stocking with pocket change and tell him he was used to it. Mom called me at 4 p.m. on Christmas Day. I was in my living room watching Theo attempt to ride a new scooter down the hallway while Marin's brother filmed it from the kitchen doorway. I saw her name on my phone. I let it ring out. She called again at 8 p.m. I was washing dishes again, which is apparently my natural habitat. Voicemail. She didn't leave one. That night I posted a photo. I never post. My account has maybe 3 pictures from the last 2 years. I uploaded 1 image. Our family around the tree, kids in pajamas, Marin laughing with her head tilted back, Claire and Don on the couch, food on the table. Behind the tree, on the wall, you could see the frames. Photo after photo of our life. Every frame was us. None of them were Diane. A cousin shared it. Mom saw it. I know because Vicky told Marin. Mom saw the photo. She zoomed in on the wall. She zoomed in. She looked at the frames behind the tree and counted the faces the way Ellie counted the gifts. Vicky called Mom in early December. She said, "He's not coming this year. He's doing his own Christmas. His wife's family is going. Stop waiting for the call." Mom didn't listen. She waited for me to call with our arrival time the way I always do. December 23rd passed. December 24th passed. On December 25th at 11 a.m., Mom put on her coat and got in her car and drove 2 hours to my house without calling ahead. She walked up the porch steps. The wreath was on the door, a wreath I bought, for a door that was mine, on a house that didn't need her to be full. Through the window, she could see the living room. The tree was there, real, full-sized, decorated lopsided on the bottom because that's where Ellie can reach. Wrapping paper was everywhere. Theo was on the floor building something out of a box. Claire was handing out slices of pie. Don was on the couch telling a story with his hands the way he does. Everyone was laughing. The table in the dining room was set for 8. Every chair was filled. On the wall behind the tree, frame after frame after frame. Our holidays, our birthdays, our random Tuesdays. Our life, built by the people in it, for the people in it. Mom stood on the porch with her hand up, ready to knock. She didn't knock. She stood there for about 30 seconds. I saw her from inside. I was near the window holding a mug of coffee that was still too hot, and I looked up, and there she was on the other side of the glass. She was wearing the same coat she wore the day she carried me to the car with my collarbone. I noticed that detail, and I wish I hadn't because it made the next part harder. She lowered her hand, turned around, walked to her car, sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and the engine off for about a minute. Then she backed out of my driveway and drove away. I didn't open the door. Part of me wanted to go out there. Part of me wanted to stand on that porch and deliver every sentence I've been practicing in the shower for a year, every receipt, every stocking, every retag gift, every birthday that got absorbed into something else. And a part of me I don't like visiting wanted to let her in. Hand her a plate. Pour her coffee. Pretend it was fine. Because that part of me is still 9 years old being carried across a yard by a woman who did the voices in a book and called me the bravest kid she'd ever met. And that kid wants his mom to sit on his bed one more time and make the dragon sound like Mr. Callahan. But I turned back to the living room. And here's where I am. The morning after Christmas. Ellie is on the floor with her new art set, drawing something with serious concentration, her tongue poking out the way it does when she's focused. Theo is asleep on the couch with one sock on and one sock off, a candy cane wrapper stuck to his pajama sleeve, his mouth slightly open. Marin is in the kitchen reading something on her phone, holding a coffee she'll actually finish because she's not the one who forgets about mugs. The tree lights are still on even though it's 10 a.m. because nobody turned them off last night and nobody cares. The house is quiet. Nobody is counting anything. Nobody is watching from the edge of the room trying to figure out if they got enough. Nobody is performing. Nobody is measuring. Ellie looked up at me and held out a crayon without checking her pile first. The green one. She didn't count how many she had left. She just handed it to me like it was the most natural thing in the world to share something without being asked. That's all I wanted. That's the whole thing. If you grew up being the one who built the holiday and never got thanked for it, I'd read your story. Drop it below. Subscribe if you want more.